Hey everybody, welcome to my 2018 Gaming Retrospective. I wanted to take some time to look back at the games I played and kind of reflect a little bit about why I like them and maybe share with you guys some games you might have not seen before. The order of these games aren't meant to reflect the order that I enjoyed them, and you could probably mix all of these around and justify where they would be placed on a top 10 list for me. It's more just to share the things I enjoyed the most and have a chance to gush about them and talk about them a little more. None of these little talks are meant to be really deep analysis or reviews. It really is just a time for me to gush about what I like this year and kind of just have an excuse to share it with people. I also made it exclusive to games that have only played the first time, or else Resident Evil and Kingdom Hearts would just be on this list this year. Also, the games on this list aren't exclusive to 2018, it's just games that I might have played this year. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about some of the games I enjoyed the most in 2018. I hope you guys enjoy. Monster Hunter World is the latest entry in the long-running and sometimes confusingly ordered Monster Hunter series. And this may come as a surprise, but you hunt monsters in it, but it's a damn fun time hunting monsters. This is actually my first foray into the Monster Hunter series, with all the other titles kind of being confusing and not really sure where to enter. Monster Hunter World seemed like a new chapter in the series and the perfect place for a newbie like me to enter. While the story in Monster Hunter World is a bit on the light side, with the basic premise being you're a member of an expedition team entering a new world, the characters are kind of a whatever thing, but the actual setting of being in a new world and the set pieces that offers are pretty incredible. The game does a great job of capturing the feeling of trekking into an unknown place, from the way you forage the environments for crafting, use environmental hazards to get the leg up on some challenging foes, and just the movement of swinging on vines, hiding in dense plant areas, and sliding down slopes. Everything contributes to a feeling that you're this new pioneer in a new world. And the areas you go to in Monster Hunter World are really quite something. I don't want to show too many of them off because I think a lot of the charm of the game is going on these expeditions to them for the first time. But my personal favorite is this coral reef area where it looks like all the water has been sucked out, but there's still these jellyfish monsters and fish-looking monsters flying above you. It's such a great feeling and honestly the most gorgeous area in my opinion. It's my favorite place to go and do some extra hunts if I need some extra parts. Now, speaking of hunting monsters, I found this game to be pretty challenging in the beginning, probably because I'm a bit of a newcomer to the series, but once you learn your weapon's moveset and how the monster's behavior is, it's such a satisfying feeling to finally conquer it. I ended up settling into using the longsword. I liked the counter mechanic it had, and using a helm splitter on a big-ass monster never ceased to be fun. But while the game can be relentlessly difficult at times, it's never like it doesn't give you options. Taking a step back to forage for different traps, ammunition, or items to use against monsters to paralyze them, put them to sleep, or poison, you always feel like you have options to tackle these challenges. And that's probably the thing Monster Hunter World does best. A feeling of challenge while never feeling insurmountable. And while I went through most of this game solo, there is the option to call in multiplayer SOS, where players will see that you need help and they'll come help you do whatever mission you're working on. I personally found it a little more satisfying to tackle a monster by myself, but it's nice that they have this option, especially if you finish a hunt and you just want to hunt with your friends. The multiplayer functionality worked fine for the most part, I think. I played after the PC launch a little bit, so I never encountered any of the problems some people had right off of the bat, so lucky me, I guess. Another small aspect I really appreciate about Monster Hunter World is that I never feel like it fails to be fun. You have this little Palico companion with you on all your hunts, which is like a little cat creature that will help you in combat and sometimes bring you healing items. It's adorable, and you really do build a connection by the end of it. I love my little Palico, Gatomon. And another small thing is these kind of special events they have, like the silly Mega Man event where you're able to unlock a full like little 8-bit looking Mega Man armor for your Palico. And this game has a staggering amount of content. Outside of the main story, there's the whole endgame content that is always being added and challenges are being rotated out. This game is just made to last, and with the new Iceborne expansion being announced recently, I think I'm going to be hunting monsters in this world for a long time. When you look back at your childhood, what were some of your favorite television series? Maybe it was Pokemon, Dragon Ball Z, Power Rangers. I have plenty of fond memories of plenty of shows, but Digimon still holds a special place in my heart. Honestly, I could probably make a whole series of videos on how much I love Digimon Tamers, but that is a rant for another day. When I saw Digimon CyberSleuth Hacker's Memory coming out, a sequel to 2014's Digimon CyberSleuth, which unfortunately I never had gotten around to playing because I didn't have a PS4 at the time, I knew it was something I was going to have to check out. From my understanding, Hacker's Memory is a story that takes place during the same timeline as CyberSleuth, so I wasn't familiar with the story. I don't think I missed out on too much, other than probably some cute winks and nods with characters that were just in the regular CyberSleuth. The story in Hacker's Memory is surprisingly compelling. You play as a character who is a hacker who's accused of a crime they didn't commit, and you find yourself finding some friends in the hacker group named Hootie. While you're a member of Hootie, you work to find the hacker who framed you, as well as helping others in side quests along the way. This world is absolutely fascinating, and how far they go with some of those side quests and what I expected to be a kind of wholesome run-of-the-mill Digimon game really took me by surprise. And of course, while you're doing all this fun stuff, you're going to be training Digimon all along the way. Digimon are treated fairly differently in this world, where they're seen almost more as just like a tool to be used and not so much a companion and friend that a lot of us might see Digimon as. An interesting subplot that runs along this game is the idea of a black market where people just trade and sell the Digimon data to be used. It is a really interesting spin on kind of a less traditional Digimon world. The main plot of you trying to clear your name and what eventually spins into a world catastrophe type Digimon event is honestly pretty incredible, I thought, especially as a fan of the series. And while the cast of characters are all pretty memorable and interesting, the 3 other Hootie members you spend a lot of time with end up becoming your favorite. Erica and her Wormmon companion are easily my favorite, and by the end of it, I got really emotional and a little choked up. It really reminded me of how I felt at the ending of the original adventure, 01. I don't want to give anything away, but it is a wallop of an ending. But story aside, the actual Digimon training and battle also work really well. There's so many evolution paths. I never got to any point where I felt like, there's a Digimon I remember that I can't make. The combat works really well. There's a pretty simple rock, paper, scissors type system with virus, data, and vaccine type Digimon. It's nothing groundbreaking, but it works well. Sometimes your Digimon will work together in a cross attack, and the special animations that some of the moves have really feel like a love letter to fans, and they're always fun to watch in battle. One little thing I wish that was available is if your Digimon would de-evolve out of combat and kind of pop back into it for combat, but I know this would probably slow down gameplay a lot, and it's just kind of, I would like to have a companion Digimon that isn't a 20-foot sword-wielding monster. And while I am in love with this game, I do have to mention something that is kind of a downside, and that's some evolution paths can be a real slog to get to. There is this one stat that you get every time you evolve, and it builds up even after you devolve a Digimon. So you have to go through a few cycles of devolving and evolving to get to some of the more cool evolutions. It isn't bad the first few times, but when you want a team full of badass Digimon, it really slows things down when you need to just run around in circles and devolve and evolve. Outside of that though, I really love this game. It was roughly 60 hours long with me doing most of the side quests, and this new Digimon world really feels like it's appropriate and something for a more modern age. I really need to go back and play the original CyberSleuth, but I highly suggest anyone with love for Digimon in their heart to give Hacker's Memory a shot. And hey, if nothing else, it's really fun to make your dream Digimon team from when you were a kid. Back in 2011, Dark Souls 1 served me my ass with the Bell Tower demons, and ever since then I had a really sour feeling on the Soulsborne games. And there's also this weird culture around Dark Souls where you just have to get good, and everyone's kind of not willing to help you, and they're just like, learn how to roll, idiot. And so I kind of stayed away, but when Dark Souls 3 was sold pretty cheap on a Humble Bundle this year, I decided to give it a shot, and a friend of mine helped me kind of get over that beginner hump, and I eventually learned how to effectively play Dark Souls. Granted, I was still relying on some of the easier to use weapons, but once I got the hang of it, I was taking on the Nameless King in no time. It's really hard to put into words what exactly clicked to make Dark Souls fun for me. I always had an appreciation for the world building and lore and the characters and boss designs. It's a shame that the gameplay always kind of kept me back, but once it all came together for me, I really fell in love with this game and couldn't put it down. And I know it's a little cliche to say, but the difficulty of this game makes the feeling when you conquer something truly something that's unique to the series. The feeling of when I finally beat Sister Frida, who was personally the hardest boss for me, is honestly something I won't forget and probably one of my top gaming moments ever. And once you can handle the gameplay, you can really appreciate what else Dark Souls 3 has to offer. The huge sprawling world that feels connected is done so well, and adds to that feeling of accomplishment. When you finally get to Lothric Castle, and you get to see that cliff you were standing on so many hours ago, you really feel like you've made progress. And the epic gothic music that plays in boss battles and when you're traversing areas really adds to that feeling that you're in a dying world past its prime, and that you're the last hope for any light to survive, or maybe plunging into darkness if that's what you want to do. Now that I'm on board with the Souls games, I'm currently working my way through number 2 and eventually number 1, and looking forward, I'm really excited for Shadows Die Twice. I'm curious to see how the Souls series is going to evolve past its initial trilogy, and hopefully it can capture the same magic that these Souls games have. And I'm excited to be on the boat and hopefully not die too much anymore. We all have ways we cope with our insecurities, anxiety, and sadness, right? Maybe you go out for a walk, talk to a friend, or maybe spend some extra time petting your dog. Now, what if instead of doing something small like that, you do something way more grand, like decide to climb Mount Everest? That is the question that Celeste answers. The game begins with our intrepid protagonist Madeline going to Celeste Mountain to try to find answers to problems we're not sure about yet. As you eventually find out, Celeste has a way of making you manifest your inner demons, forcing you to face them in the most literal of ways. Early on, you're introduced to this anti-Madeline, who is kind of the essence of all of her sadness and depression and insecurities. As you continue to climb the mountain, you'll face off against her in various platforming challenges until eventually getting to the top and being forced to coalesce with your darkness. If the only thing that Celeste did well was this incredible story of Madeline facing her mental illness in this mountain, I would put it on this list, but the incredible and tight platforming mechanics are what elevate this game to truly special levels. The game has a perfect difficulty curve. As you climb the mountain and more mechanics are slowly added, you never feel like too much is being thrown at you and you don't have time to adapt. And while this game can be very, very difficult, the way death works and how it's just so quick to respawn you at the start of your screen, it never feels frustrating. The basic mechanic does make you feel like a mountain climber. There's a simple dash and you're able to climb onto walls. A lot of the mechanics come from specific level obstacles, and this makes the game a joy to play through, always looking forward to what's going to come next. And this game has a glutton of content, ranging from B-sides, which are just remixed, very difficult versions of levels, which honestly, I couldn't get through a B-side. That stuff is really, really tough. To these collectible strawberries that force you to tackle screens without using your dash to collect them. To an entire minigame that is just like 8-bit Celeste with a little different mechanics, but it's just a game within a game. This all adds up to what feels like a very complete experience, and something that is infinitely replayable. The mechanics are always just so fun to play around with, you always feel like you're improving. The last bit I want to touch on is how incredible the soundtrack is. It combines this somber emotional piano with inspirational synthwave music into a perfect mix. Whether it's to make you feel an emotional beat or to inspire you to get through a level, the soundtrack always hits the mark. If you have any interest in platformers or a really emotional tale that touches on mental illness, I can't recommend Celeste enough, and hope you guys get the chance to play it. Shadow of the Colossus is probably the closest thing to a non-blind playthrough on this list. I remember playing this a little bit back in the PlayStation 2 era, but I was way too afraid of the Colossi, and I think after the first one, I was too scared to enter the arena, so I never got around to finishing it back then. When I saw the remastered version coming out, I knew this was the chance to get some revenge on some childhood fears. And I'm glad I did. This game really does hold up, especially with the gorgeous PlayStation 4 graphics. Everything else that I remember hearing about this game really does seem to hold up. The gameplay revolves around 16 individual boss fights that kind of act almost more as puzzles than straight up fights. You take control of a mysterious wanderer, fighting these Colossus for an unknown reason, trying to save a mysterious girl, only with your horse as company. This might come off as a little pretentious, but Shadow of the Colossus really does feel like a work of art. With the gorgeous landscape, dark fairy tale story, and amazing music, everything comes together with such a short but sweet experience. The gameplay against each of the Colossi are pretty straightforward. They have sigils scattered around their body, and it's up to you to find how you're going to get to them. Once you get on top of them, you're able to stab your magic sword into the sigils and do some damage. They range from underwater to flying to huge, just monolith colossi, It's really impressive, the designs that they came up with. I'm only showing the first one here because I really think a lot of the charm of this game is encountering the Colossi for the first time. And since each one is a unique puzzle, I really would feel bad if I gave it away to anyone who hasn't played it yet. I will say that maybe one or two of them gave me a really hard time. It's a little obtuse how you're supposed to do damage, but if you turn the in-game hints on, you'll probably be able to figure it out. I was a prideful fool and turned them off. I was really convinced to try to do it myself. And I know I've mentioned this a lot, the soundtrack for this game, Roar of the Earth, is absolutely incredible. It's one of those soundtracks I'll put on if I'm doing house chores or driving to work that just really gets you amped up and makes you feel really motivated. I'll still go back into some of the time trials and fight some of my favorite Colossi just to hear the themes that play when you're fighting them. This game is probably a good example of something that's greater than the sum of its parts. Because the idea of a minimalist story, just fighting 16 bosses, riding around on a horse, doesn't sound all that great, but the direction, the music, and the actual gameplay really ties everything together into something that's truly memorable. And if you don't have a PlayStation to play this, please, please, please go listen to Roar of the Earth. It is probably my favorite game soundtrack of all time. Out of all the games on this list, One Shot probably had the biggest ratio of what I expected versus how much I ended up enjoying it. I thought I was just throwing a few bucks at a cute little indie title that had a little cute cat person on the front, but it was so much more than that. You wake up and immediately you know that this is going to be a weird journey. You find yourself in a dark, unfamiliar world, and you take control of a young Nico, a human-cat hybrid that has a very stylish hat and scarf. Things quickly take a turn as Nico refers to the player as God, and you find out that in this narrative, both you and Nico are going to be incredibly important to the story. You see, Nico is the messiah for this world. And to save this world, your task was taking the sun, which looks like a light bulb here, into the center of the world and replacing their dying sun. Throughout the way, you're going to see this crumbling world that is slowly dying, with some people holding on hope for their messiah, while others have already resigned to their fate that their world will soon be extinguished. Without giving too much away, you begin on the outskirts of the world that has become toxic and uninhabitable other than robots, and as you work your way in, you'll find more civilization, and you'll meet a very interesting cast of characters all throughout the way. What really won me over in the way this story is presented is that it's filtered all through Nico's very innocent eyes, where they'll look to you for advice when they're not sure what to do. And the bond and relationship you grow with Nico, traveling throughout this world, is really at the heart of this all. Throughout the points, Nico has the option to sleep, and you'll get glimpses at their home. They'll reminisce with you after they wake up how much they miss their home. Nico just woke up in this world, not sure why they were tasked to save this place, but you quickly learn that Nico has a good heart, and they desire to save this world. All of these characters and relationship you build with Nico all culminate in a very emotional and pretty heart-wrenching ending. The gameplay is nearly entirely composed of puzzle solving, exploration, and dialogue. Like I said, you'll begin on a lower level and eventually reach the central tower where you're meant to replace the sun. Some of the puzzles are noodle scratchers, but the real fun comes from the exploration of the different levels of this world and the people you meet along the way. And like I mentioned before, Nico's little comments as she talks to you in her head is just so dang charming and very endearing. It really makes exploring this world a joy. I'd love to talk more about specific characters and locations, but I really think this is a game that should be experienced. It often goes on sale for a few bucks, so I really hope you take the chance and give One Shot a shot. I'll be honest, when I saw a God of War reboot/sequel coming, I really wasn't too excited for it. In a time where every series is getting an unnumbered reboot, I thought God of War was just going to be another run-of-the-mill kind of thing. But I am proud to swallow my pride and say I was so wrong. God of War does an incredible job at respecting the original trilogy, while also successfully moving the franchise into a Norse mythology world. You can really tell that the developers had a blast making this world. God of War does feel different from its original counterpart, but this new world feels just as appropriate, with a more mature Kratos at the center of the game. Exploring this new story of Kratos really is a huge draw of the game, so I wouldn't go too deep into details, but the main premise of the game is that Kratos seems to have been married in the time off off since 3, and also had a son. The game begins with Kratos' wife already being deceased, and it's a journey of Kratos and his son, Atreus, to spread the wife's ashes, as she had wished. Of course, like so many times in Kratos' life, the Norse gods are going to get in the way. We're not sure why they're hunting Kratos or what he's done to transgress in this world, but throughout the story you'll travel through different Norse realms, meeting various gods, killing a couple of them, seeing dark elves and other mythological creatures. It's really incredible what is able to be made when a game like this has such a big budget and such a dedicated team. As a kind of general fan of Norse mythology and reading a book on it before playing this game, seeing so many of the legends come to life and being playable really just gave me goosebumps at some parts. And this older, grizzled Kratos isn't any pushover. While the Blades of Chaos seem to be missing, the new primary weapon, the Leviathan Axe, feels just as great to play with. The amount of weight and power that you feel when you throw it and bring it back to your hand really makes all the combat feel really visceral and really great to play. And this game also does a companion that is just as good as The Last of Us. While Atreus begins the game a little bit incompetent, throughout the game he'll grow and mature and become more proficient in combat. Towards the end, heck, he was doing probably like 60% of the work with me, keeping people crowd controlled. And while the father and son dynamic is a pretty easy vehicle to tell a story through, it really feels like it was utilized well. It's apparent that Atreus isn't aware of his father's past, and the lingering tension between the two of them always keeps the player on edge, wondering when this relationship is going to reach a boiling point. This is an extremely promising first outing for this new, more mature Kratos, and the ending closes this first chapter perfectly. I might have started off as a bit of a skeptic, but I'm totally on board for this new North story that Kratos is going to go on. NieR Automata was easily my biggest gaming regret of 2017. I'm kicking myself that it took me so long to get around to playing this game, over a year after its initial release. As a general fan of Platinum games, this really should have been a no-brainer for me to play right away, but I'm really glad I finally got around to it. This was also my first exposure to Yoko Taro, and I don't think I was quite ready for just how weird some of this game could be. It never feels inappropriate for the world, and it always keeps things entertaining. But this game did take me on a lot of wiki dives to really understand what was going on at some points. This game is never ashamed or embarrassed to be totally weird, a little provocative, but it's always a hell of a lot of fun. Honestly, the story in this game I probably would never do it justice with the few minute rundown I'm giving, but you take control of Unit 2B, an android tasked with taking out the evil robots and fighting for the glory of mankind. You're accompanied by 9S, a lovable companion. And throughout the game, you'll get to the bottom of what happened to humans, what's going on with the robots, and some kind of alien invasion that's also mentioned. It all makes sense by the end of it, I promise. Talking about it now, it really amazes me how they managed to make this crazy convoluted story. And the way 2B and 9S slowly mature and learn things throughout the story really makes these two androids some of the most human and lovable characters I've ever seen in a game. But hey, maybe you're not into whole philosophical AI stories that slowly develop over multiple storylines. Luckily, if you're just in it for some good old-fashioned robot slicing and dicing, that game has this in spades. The weapon loadout and combos you can pull off with 2B really make you feel like you are an efficient killing machine. With different chips being able to customize different moves slightly, it really does give this role-playing feeling that you're this battle android able to adapt to any situation you come across. And with a dodge system that kind of works like Witch Time from Bayonetta, where time kind of slows down for a sec after a successful dodge, the game is able to throw a ton of enemies at you, and you're still able to handle it with style. And your main character, 2B, is just so gorgeous and aesthetically pleasing. It's just fun to run around this world, hover around on your pod, and cut through enemies like butter. And if smashing things isn't your style, you get the option to play through the game again as 9S, who has a much slower and kind of hacking-focused combat style. I will say he's not nearly as fun to me as 2B, but it is fun to see the story and get things fleshed out from someone else's perspective. And all this world is tied together with such an amazing soundtrack. I think it even won Best Soundtrack Award at the Game Awards in 2017. It does such a good job at differentiating different areas and giving them such a unique flavor. My personal favorite probably being the Carnival song that played. It is just so haunting, and it's such a bastardization of kind of happy carnival music. It fits perfectly for this dystopian destroyed world. Like I had mentioned with Shadow of the Colossus, if you're never able to play NieR, at least give the soundtrack a chance and give it a listen. And while it took me a year to get around to NieR, I'm gonna jump on any future Yoko Taro projects immediately. This guy is such an enigma. I just know that anything he has his hand in is gonna be entertaining. If you're a fan of smooth gameplay, amazing music, and a pretty intricate story, go get out there and fight for the glory of mankind and play NieR. Okay, so before I talk about Deltarune, I do want to issue a general spoiler warning. I'm not going to talk about any story elements, but just kind of the gameplay I record in the background might have some minor spoilers, so if you're sensitive to that, I do suggest you might want to skip this last one. Halloween of 2018 started like any normal Halloween. A slight chill in the air, everyone's a little bit spookier, but little did I know that the most unexpected sequel of the year was going to drop. Out of nowhere, Toby Fox decides to drop Deltarune, a mysterious sequel to Undertale, which it's an anagram by the way if you didn't know that. And I am jumping out of my seat at work. Heck, I was ready to take some sick time off to get home and play it. I was so damn excited. The original Undertale probably ends up being like maybe top 5 of my favorite games of all time, with the soundtrack not being a small part of that. I'm not kidding. Toby Fox was my most listened to artist in 2017 in my little Spotify wrap up. I seriously love the soundtrack. And so when I booted up Deltarune, I really didn't know what I was getting. It starts off with this character creation thing just for the game to slap it out of your hand and tell you nothing matters. It's so appropriately meta in Undertale. I knew that Toby Fox hadn't lost the spark and that he was going to make something great here. I'm honestly not sure exactly what Deltarune is. Is it a prequel? Is it a sequel? Is it an alternate universe just with characters that we've seen before? With this being the first episode in what's going to be a saga of Deltarune, we really don't have too many answers yet. And while this is an entirely new story, just seeing these characters in the world again and remixed with their roles in this new town really is just heartwarming, and I got really giddy just seeing all of our favorite characters back again. Similar to Undertale, you take control of a human in a monster-inhabited world. And what begins as kind of a slice of life going to school story quickly takes the Alice in Wonderland turn as you fall down and you enter a new unknown world. The problem with making a game as unique as Undertale is that anything you do to follow up is going to be compared to that. Luckily, Deltarune makes everything just different enough that it feels like its own experience. Gone is the single-person party, replaced with a more traditional RPG party, where you'll have 3 people with their different quirks and abilities. You still have the option to attack things or do different acts to be able to spare enemies, where there's a new TP% system that you generate as you have close calls or you decide to defend. It acts as a magic resource that different party members are able to utilize to try to pacify enemies. While I could probably make an entire video talking about every character in this, I'll only touch on the 3 main people. The 3 characters that make up your party are Chris the human, Susie the monster, and Ralsei the prince. Chris, the character you control, is another silent protagonist similar to Frisk in the first game. There's Susie, your hyper-aggressive classmate who takes every opportunity she has to put her axe in any enemy she comes across. And then there's Prince Ralsei, probably my favorite of the group. They take the role of the more traditional mage/priest character. The interactions between these 3 are so heartwarming, and seeing them grow together throughout this about 3-hour demo really makes my heart swell. They're written with just the right amount of humor and drama and character that you really believe that these are just 3 nobodies who got thrown together to do this world-saving task. How quickly Toby is able to endear us to these new characters is really pretty masterful. And this is done with wonderful set pieces and supporting characters. Our main 3 are put up into some very interesting situations, and seeing how they handle it with each other and other people really gives us an idea of what Ralsei and Susie and Chris are all about. And like I said before, the music in this game is absolutely amazing. I've already listened to the soundtrack probably 50 times. It is a bit shorter since this is just the first episode in what Deltarune will eventually become. And while I don't want to give a review of the entire soundtrack, many of the songs in Deltatale have a way of mixing the Undertale leitmotif with this new Deltarune melody, and it really feels like this is a smooth transition into this new story. If this doesn't end up being related to Undertale, the music is a perfect way to tie it to that original game while also being something new. This also has an impressive amount of content for what ended up being just a demo. Between the main game, a secret boss, and being able to explore the monster town after completing the game, there's plenty here for an Undertale fan to rip apart and analyze. I guess if I was ranking this list in any specific order, Deltarune may have been my favorite game overall. With how near and dear Undertale is to my heart, how unexpected this release was, on top of having another amazing soundtrack and interesting combat system, I really love Deltarune. It's currently a free demo, so if any of this sounded appealing, please go give this game a chance. It's just as unique and enjoyable as the original, while also expanding on it in many interesting ways. And there you have it. Those are my favorite games I played in 2018. I would mention that I have not played Spider-Man or Red Dead. Both of those I'm currently in the process of playing, and hey, maybe they would have made it onto this list if I had actually gotten the time to play them. I had a really fun time kind of pre-recording and being able to assemble my thoughts a little more versus when I'm just streaming. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little more prepared content. I'm excited to see what 2019 has in store, with Kingdom Hearts 3 and Resident Evil 2 Remake coming out of the gate strong in January. I really enjoyed the time I took to make this and be a little more reflective about the games I played and why I enjoyed them. Sometimes we can get so bogged down with the amount of content and stuff. Sometimes it's important just to take a second to really think about what you did and why you enjoyed it. I don't want to get too rambly, but I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and feel free to leave a comment and let me know what you thought about my games. Or come swing by my Twitch channel. I'm usually live a few days during the week, and I'd love to know what you thought. Momentai, guys. I hope you have a great New Year's, and I'll see you in 2019.